I can't pinpoint the exact moment I stopped waiting for that Christmas invitation. Maybe it was during the second week of December, when the family group chat usually exploded with messages about who's bringing what to dinner, whose turn it was to buy the ugly sweaters, and whether we were doing Secret Santa again. But this year, dead silence. No messages, no planning, not even one of my dad's terrible holiday memes that usually made us all cringe. At first, I convinced myself they were just running behind schedule. My mom, Susan, was the type of woman who couldn't leave a single ribbon untied or a decoration out of place. Maybe she was planning something special. My younger sister Chloe had always been obsessed with grand gestures, especially the kind that looked perfect on Instagram with the right filter and caption. And my father Richard? Well, he'd been forgetful before. Maybe I was just overthinking everything, but I couldn't stop checking my phone. Every few minutes, I'd grab it without thinking, scrolling straight to our family chat, staring at that empty conversation thread like it might suddenly spring to life. No new texts, no missed calls, nothing. The silence wasn't just quiet, it was deafening. It was the kind of silence that makes your ears ring when you're standing in a room that used to be full of laughter and warmth. By December 20th, I stopped pretending this was some kind of mistake. I knew exactly what this silence meant. I knew what they were choosing to do. They just didn't have the guts to say it out loud, and somehow, that made it so much worse. Because when people scream at you, at least you still exist in their world. When they go completely silent, it's like you've already been erased from their story. I didn't tell anyone about it. Not my coworkers, not even my one good friend from college who still called me on birthdays. How do you explain that you're 31 years old, successful, running your own business, paying your own bills and other people's bills, yet you're sitting alone waiting for a Christmas invitation from people who clearly don't want you there? It was too embarrassing, too pathetic, but I kept waiting anyway. Not just for the invitation, for any sign that I hadn't completely vanished from their lives. Some tiny acknowledgement that I wasn't invisible, that I hadn't just slipped through the cracks of the house on Oak Ridge Lane where I'd learned to cook turkey and where Chloe always somehow got the bigger slice of cake. Christmas was 5 days away. I had no plans, no calls, no place to be, but I kept my phone charged just in case they remembered I existed. Then it arrived, 2 days before Christmas, like a slap in the face wrapped in corporate packaging. A FedEx envelope, thick and official looking, was waiting on my doorstep when I got back from the grocery store. It had that kind of weight that makes your stomach drop before you even open it. My first thought, embarrassingly, was hope. Maybe this was their way of apologizing. Maybe it was a formal invitation, or one of Mom's handwritten cards, or even a gift certificate from Dad with one of his forced jokes scribbled on it. I carried it inside, still wearing my coat, and placed it carefully on my kitchen counter like it was made of glass. The return address read Susan and Richard Morgan in neat, professional lettering. Something fluttered in my chest, that stupid, desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, they'd remembered they had another daughter. I opened it slowly, reverently, like the contents might somehow undo weeks of cruel silence. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No card, no greeting, no explanation. Just a cold, corporate invoice that made my blood run cold. $25,000. I blinked hard, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Then I read the details, and my heart sank straight into my stomach. This was for the 2023 Honda Civic I'd helped Chloe buy last summer. The car I'd sat beside her to pick out at the dealership. The loan I'd agreed to co-sign after Mom promised me, "It'll just be temporary, Claire. She'll pay you back, I promise." There was no mention of that promise now. Just a balance due and one line that made me feel sick. As per verbal agreement to give vehicle to Chloe Morgan, gift? I stood there, that paper trembling in my hands, and that's when it hit me. This wasn't just about excluding me from Christmas dinner. This was about rewriting history, making me the villain in their story, and then billing me for the privilege This wasn't the first time I'd been given less and expected to be grateful for it. Growing up, my family looked like something straight out of a magazine. Picture perfect house on a quiet street, matching Christmas sweaters, polite smiles for all the neighbors, and family photos that hid way more than they ever showed. My mother Susan made sure the front porch was always decorated for every season, and she was famous for her homemade desserts at church potlucks, even though most of them came from the bakery aisle, carefully unwrapped and arranged to look like she'd spent hours baking. My father Richard wasn't exactly mean. He just preferred everything smooth and efficient. He kept his voice level and his expectations sky high, even when he never actually said them out loud. Emotions made him uncomfortable. Questions made him even more uncomfortable. Then there was Chloe, 7 years younger than me, absolutely gorgeous, endlessly dramatic, and constantly excused for everything. From the time we were little kids, she had this magical ability to bend the entire world around her needs. If I cried, it meant I wasn't tough enough. If she cried, it meant someone had been cruel to her. I got praised for being independent and responsible. She got praised just for existing. There's this one moment burned into my memory from when we were kids. I'd spent an entire afternoon building this amazing, elaborate tower out of blocks in our living room. I was so proud of it. It was taller than me, perfectly balanced, a real masterpiece. Then Chloe came running through the room at full speed and knocked the whole thing down. I burst into tears, devastated. My mother came rushing in, but not to comfort me or even acknowledge my destroyed creation. She went straight to Chloe. "Are you okay, sweetheart? Did Claire scare you?" No mention of my work, no question about whether I was hurt. That's when I learned my role in this family. I wasn't there to be comforted. I was there to recover quickly, so other people wouldn't have to deal with my feelings. Nothing changed as we got older. I helped Chloe with her homework when she struggled. I made her lunch when mom was too busy. I sat through every single one of her drama club rehearsals, cheering from the audience. I picked her up from parties when she was too drunk to drive. I drove her to tutoring sessions. I stayed quiet when she slammed doors and threw tantrums. When she went to college, I helped with that too. My business was still new and struggling, but I paid for way more than I could afford. Mom and Dad claimed they were stretched thin, and Chloe was still finding her footing. They promised it would be temporary. It was always temporary until the next crisis, the next emergency, the next time Chloe needed saving. After graduation, she called me sobbing. She couldn't find a job, didn't know where to start, felt completely lost. I sent her job referrals, reached out to people I barely knew on LinkedIn, helped her rewrite her resume 3 times. A few months later, she landed a position at a mid-size design firm. Her first day Instagram post, a beaming selfie with the caption, "Made it on my own." I didn't say anything. I never said anything. Last summer, her old car finally died. She called me in complete hysterics, crying so hard I couldn't understand her at first. She needed a car to get to work, and my parents' credit cards were maxed out. Susan texted me a few hours later. "Claire, can you help? Just for now. We'll pay you back within a few weeks." I went with her to the dealership, sat through hours of paperwork, and co-signed for a $25,000 loan. It was a lot of money, more than I was comfortable with, but I told myself it was family, and family meant something. Or at least, it used to. I think the moment I started seeing things clearly was last Christmas. I'd hosted dinner that year, something Mom usually handled, but she claimed she was overwhelmed. Work deadlines, church events, something about her blood pressure being high. So I offered, like I always did. I cleaned my entire apartment, shopped for groceries, planned the perfect menu, and cooked every single dish from scratch. Not reheated, actually cooked. Mom still called it her turkey, even though I'd gotten up at 6 in the morning to prep it and basted it every hour. I made the mashed potatoes, the green bean casserole, the cranberry sauce from actual cranberries instead of the canned stuff. Chloe showed up late naturally, carrying a bottle of wine and acting like she'd done us all a huge favor just by gracing us with her presence. I'd put wrapped gifts under my little tree, nothing expensive, but thoughtful. A scarf in Mom's favorite color, a new corkscrew for Dad, and for Chloe, a framed photo of us from a beach trip years ago when we still laughed together. She didn't even unwrap it all the way. We sat down to eat, and I was exhausted but happy. That quiet kind of happiness you get when you've done something right, even if nobody notices. Then Mom really looked at me for the first time all evening. "Claire," she said, her voice too bright, too loud, "why aren't you wearing heels? It's Christmas. We have guests." I looked down at my feet. Just plain, clean flats. My back ached from hours of cooking. My hands were still red from oven mitts. And in that moment, I felt so incredibly small. I had done everything, given everything, and all they noticed was what I wasn't wearing. It wasn't the first time something like that had happened, but somehow, it felt like the last time I'd let it slide. This year, I didn't even get a group text. The family chat that used to be busy this time of year with last-minute dinner questions, shared Pinterest recipes, and reminders from Mom about defrosting the rolls just stopped including me. Sometime between Halloween and December, my name disappeared from the conversation. No one announced they were removing me. No one needed to. The silence was answer enough. I thought maybe they'd reach out privately, individually. But days kept passing, and nothing came. I finally sent one simple message. "Are we still doing anything this year?" It sat there, delivered but unread, like a ghost in the digital space. Then I saw that the group photo had changed. A new one. From Thanksgiving that I wasn't in. Of course, meanwhile, Chloe was living her best life online. Her Instagram was absolutely packed with twinkle lights, perfectly wrapped gifts, and fresh garlands draped across their banister. I recognized most of the tree ornaments I'd bought them over the years, hunting through after Christmas sales, and quiet afternoon shopping trips when I wanted to bring something beautiful home to my parents' house. There was one photo that hit me like a punch to the gut. Chloe standing next to the tree, absolutely beaming, holding a mug that said, "Family is everything." The caption read, "Can't wait to be with my real ones this Christmas." Real ones, real ones. I stared at those two words way longer than I should have. They shouldn't have hurt as much as they did, but they cut deep because I knew exactly what they meant. Real didn't mean genuine or loyal or honest. It meant present. It meant not me. I scrolled through more of her posts. Her car, the one I was still paying for, appeared in several photos. Still spotless, still new. Shopping bags spilling out of the trunk. Her laughing in the driver's seat, tagged at some high-end outlet mall I couldn't afford to shop at even before I co-signed her loan. My stomach twisted into knots. I had to look away from my phone. That was the car I was paying for. That was the family I used to belong to. That was the life I was funding from the outside. For a brief moment, I actually considered just paying the invoice. It sat on my kitchen counter for 2 days, never out of sight, watching me like it already knew. I'd cave. I told myself it would be easier that way. If I just paid it, maybe they'd come around. Maybe they'd see how much I still cared, even after being excluded. Maybe next year would be different, warmer, kinder, less cruel. It wouldn't have been the first time I'd paid money to keep the peace, but then I read the invoice again. Really read it. That line about the verbal agreement, the claim that I had voluntarily offered the car as a gift. That wasn't just an oversight or a misunderstanding. That was a complete lie. And worse than the lie was the language at the bottom. Due to Claire's disruptive and unreliable behavior, payment is requested in full before year's end. Disruptive and unreliable. I whispered those words out loud in my empty apartment, just to hear how absolutely ridiculous they sounded. Me, the one who co-signed the loan. Me, the one who'd helped raise their precious daughter when they were too tired or too busy or too focused on keeping up appearances. Me, the one who'd shown up every single time someone needed something, someone to fix their problems, someone to pay their bills, unreliable. I was the most reliable person in their lives, and they knew it. I walked to my bedroom filing cabinet and pulled out all the paperwork from the dealership. There it was, in black and white. Claire Morgan, primary co-signer. Chloe's name was underneath mine in smaller print. I'd always assumed being the co-signer just meant I was financially responsible if she defaulted. I hadn't realized it also meant I still held legal rights to the vehicle. I sat down at my kitchen table and spread everything out in front of me. The invoice, the original contract, my bank statements showing every monthly payment quietly draining from my account. Maybe I wasn't disruptive. Maybe I was just done being their personal ATM. December 26th, the day after Christmas, came quietly. No phone calls, no sudden change of heart, no miracle reconciliation. Just frost on the windows and a gray sky that couldn't decide whether to snow or not. I got up early, made strong coffee, and took a real shower, the kind where you wash your hair and pick out clothes with actual purpose. I didn't want to look vengeful or unhinged. I wanted to look ready. White blouse, dark slacks, coat buttoned all the way up. Professional, composed, unshakable. I packed a folder I'd spent half the night preparing. Loan documents, payment receipts, the original financing agreement, and a formal letter drafted by a lawyer friend of a friend. Nothing dramatic or emotional, just cold, hard facts laid out in legal language. The dealership was quiet in that post-holiday lull. A receptionist offered me coffee, and I politely declined. My hands were already steady. I didn't need caffeine, making them shake. I asked to speak to someone in finance, and a middle-aged man named Mr. Henderson appeared a few minutes later. He was polite but wary, probably wondering what kind of drama was about to unfold in his office. I introduced myself calmly, sat across from his desk, and slid the folder across to him. I'm listed as the primary co-signer on this loan, I said, my voice level and professional. The agreement was that I be reimbursed for the payments. That hasn't happened. He flipped through the papers, his eyebrows raising as he read the formal language of the legal letter. You're saying you want to initiate repossession? I'm saying I have legal grounds to protect my financial interests, I replied smoothly. The payments have all come from my account. The original agreement has been broken. I'm not being spiteful, I'm being practical. He nodded slowly, then excused himself to make some calls. I waited in his office, perfectly still and silent, watching snow start to fall outside the window. My phone buzzed once, my lawyer friend checking in. I texted back, "It's moving forward." When Mr. Henderson returned, he explained that the paperwork would be processed that afternoon. It might take 48 hours, but the vehicle could be legally reclaimed from Chloe's driveway as early as tomorrow morning. I thanked him not because I was grateful, though he'd been respectful and professional, but because I wanted to end this conversation cleanly. For the first time in years, I wasn't explaining myself. I wasn't defending my actions or justifying my decisions or softening my tone to make other people comfortable. I was simply acting on my rights. It happened faster than I'd expected. By the morning of December 28th, the car was gone. A quiet tow truck in the early hours, no sirens, no confrontation, no drama, just an empty space in Chloe's driveway where the Honda Civic used to sit. It was the kind of absence that speaks louder than any argument ever could. I didn't witness the actual repossession, but I definitely saw what came after. That afternoon, Chloe went live on TikTok. Her voice was shaky, her eyes red-rimmed, her mascara smudged just enough to suggest she'd been crying for hours. The video title was pure clickbait drama. "My own sister stole my car," she sobbed through the first few seconds, then launched into a stream of half-truths and wild accusations. "She didn't even tell me," she said, her voice breaking dramatically. "One day it was there, and the next morning it was just gone. Who does that? Who takes back a gift from their own family?" The comments came flooding in immediately, thousands of them. Some were sympathetic. "That's so cold. Families shouldn't do that to each other." But others weren't buying her performance. Wait, didn't your sister pay for that car? Maybe you should have paid her back instead of making TikToks. You sound more embarrassed than actually hurt. I watched the video exactly once. That was enough. I didn't comment, didn't share screenshots, didn't fire back with my side of the story. I just closed the app and blocked her account. Then I blocked Susan and Richard and the two cousins who started sending me vague messages like "what's going on?" As if they hadn't already chosen their side in this whole mess. I filed the entire situation under a mental folder labeled Peace and decided not to open it again. I wasn't angry anymore. There was nothing left to argue about, nothing left to prove. What they thought about me didn't matter now, because the car wasn't the only thing I'd taken back. I'd also reclaimed my self-respect. The first call came on New Year's Eve. I let it ring and ring and ring. Then another call and another. First from Mom, then Dad, then both of them together on speakerphone. I finally answered on the third day, not because I owed them anything, but because I was genuinely curious about what version of me they'd created in their heads this time. Mom's voice came through first, sharp and full of righteous outrage. How could you do this, Claire? Chloe is absolutely devastated. You've humiliated our entire family. Then Dad cut in, his voice rougher than I remembered. You've completely ruined Christmas. You embarrassed your sister. This was cruel and vindictive. I let them talk. I listened to every word without interrupting, without defending myself, without trying to explain. I had nothing left to prove to them. They were too far gone to hear anything but the echo of their own voices anyway, but then their tone shifted. The anger gradually softened into something else, desperation. Chloe needs that car for work, Mom said, her voice getting thinner and more strained. We can't afford to buy another one right now. Please, Claire, Dad added quietly. Can't we just talk about this like adults? I waited. I took a deep breath and looked out my window at the gray sky and bare trees. Then I answered, calmly and clearly, I'm not your backup plan anymore. I'm not your personal bank. And I'm definitely not the villain in a story you wrote without asking me. There was complete silence on the other end. Just a quiet inhale, like they were holding their breath. You chose Chloe, I continued. You chose to cut me out of Christmas. You chose to send me a bill instead of an invitation. You chose to lie about what I promised. You made your choice, and now you get to live with the consequences. I let that hang in the air for a moment. From now on, I said, send her the bills, not me, and then I hung up. No shouting, no tears, no dramatic declarations. Just a simple click, and then silence. That January, I booked myself a cabin in Oregon. Nothing fancy, just one bedroom, no Wi-Fi, surrounded by towering pine trees and the kind of honest stillness you can't fake. The kind of quiet that forces you to sit with yourself, whether you're ready or not. I hiked every morning, bundled up in layers, breathing in air that was sharp and clean and real. I read paperback novels by the fireplace and drank tea without constantly checking the time. The silence didn't hurt here. It felt earned, peaceful, like something I'd fought for and won. One afternoon, I walked into the tiny town nearby and bought a plain white greeting card. No glitter, no fancy script, no nativity scene, just a smooth, blank surface and a simple envelope. Back at the cabin, I sat by the window watching snow drift sideways through the trees, and I wrote 3 words inside. Merry Christmas. Anyway, I didn't sign it. I didn't include a return address, just their names, their home address, the house on Oak Ridge Lane where I'd once peeled potatoes and folded cloth napkins and been told I looked tired when all I'd wanted was to be seen as enough. I mailed it from the small-town post office on my last day in Oregon. It felt like finally closing a book I'd been trapped inside for way too long. When I returned home, I unpacked slowly. I hung up my coat, put the kettle on, and for the first time in years, I didn't brace myself for their calls. I didn't wonder what they'd say next or how they'd try to manipulate me back into their story, because it didn't matter anymore. I had already said everything I needed to say, and this time, I'd said it for me.